to Sideways Look, looking where others don't. I am your host, Dr. Paul. Today we're going to talk about something that sounds great on the surface: climate resilience, green infrastructure, and sustainability upgrades. But if we dig a little deeper, and you'll find a different kind of storm brewing, one that's pushing the most vulnerable communities right out of the neighborhoods they called home for decades. This episode is titled Climate Proof or People Proof: The Hidden Cost of Green Gentrification. So let's take a sideways look. Most of us are familiar with traditional gentrification. Now picture a working class neighborhood where longtime residents, often blacks, Latinos, or immigrant families, begin to see their rent rise, their local shops replaced with cold brew cafes and office spaces. That's because developers are moving in. Property taxes goes up as well. And eventually, the people who built the community are priced out. But now, a new kind of gentrification is emerging, one that is disguised as sustainability. So, what is green gentrification? It is the process of implementing environmental planning that later leads to the exclusion of minorities or less affluent residents. This could also include whites. To simply put, it is where neighborhoods get greener while rent gets higher and longtime residents are pushed out. It happens when cities invest in climate resilience flood barriers as well as tree canopies, energy efficient buildings. But those improvements boost property values and lead to displacement. The intention may be environmental justice, but the outcome often leads to environmental exclusion. So let's look at some real world examples. Take Miami's Liberty City and Little Haiti. For decades, these inland Black and Haitian American communities were overlooked. No trendy development was happening, no investment. But with rising sea levels threatening Miami's coastline, developers saw new value in higher ground neighborhoods. Suddenly, climate resilience, which made those areas hot properties, not for the people who live there, but for the outsiders looking to profit. Rent spiked, seniors got priced out, and the community that had withered neglect was now being pushed out, all in the name of environmental progress. Another example, in Brooklyn's Kiwanis neighborhood, a federal Superfund cleanup and green upgrades triggered a wave of luxury construction, while existing residents wondered how much longer they could afford to stay. So, who's most at risk? Communities of color, Latinos, low income renters, seniors living on a fixed income. You see, these are the same communities most at risk also from climate change, flooding, heat, and energy insecurities. They need resilience investment the most, but without protective policies, they're displaced by the very upgrades meant to help them. So let's take a look at the policies. Let's talk about policies, because this isn't just about the neighborhoods, it's also about the rules that shape them. For example, climate resilience policy. This is where federal dollars through the Infrastructure Investment and Job Acts from FEMA and HUD often fund high visibility projects that boost real estate, not just help communities with the greatest needs. What about affordable housing policies? Green improvement must be coupled with protections like rent stabilization, anti-displacement funds, and community land trust. What about environmental justice? There's an executive order that state, which is the Justice 40, aims at directing 40% of climate investment to disadvantaged communities. But folks, these are the cities that we don't know that are on the line. Let's take a look at that. Green gentrification doesn't just change neighborhoods, it shifts power. How does it shift the power? By increased population density, which brings in higher income voters. New residents reshape voter registration trends. If you look at local policy priorities, which also shifts redistricting pressures, which emerges to reflect new demographics. Community activism around green also shifts the engagement process. More resources go to gentrification areas, which also influence the electoral process and outcome. Here's the sideways look. Climate policy is not neutral. Who we protect and who we displace says everything about our values. If green infrastructure is only green for some and not for all, then we're not building resilience. We're just rebuilding inequity. The good news, we can do better. With community engagement, inclusive zoning, and climate smart housing protection, we can create neighborhoods that are both climate ready and people centered. That's it for today's episode of Sideways Look, looking where others don't. If you found today's discussion valuable, share it with a friend, a policymaker, or someone who thinks green always means good. Because sustainability without equity is just another form of exclusion. Thanks for listening. Until next time, keep looking sideways. Please don't forget to share, like, and subscribe.